Most of the time, we shape our necklines by decreasing on the knitting machine, but there are some really good reasons to occasionally want to use cut and sew. I'll show you one here and how to accomplish it nicely. You are looking at the front of a sweater knitted out of self-striping yarn, and we are about to do a cut and sew neckline on it for a very good reason. I realize that there are three opinions on cut and sew. One of them is that it's the devil's own invention, and if that's your viewpoint, you probably won't be convinced by anything I say. Another is that it's a useful blending of two kinds of skills that you have, and if that's your viewpoint, you're probably already good at it and you don't need what I'm going to say. If it's something that you would love to dare but you are afraid won't work out for you, this is for you, because we're going to show you how it can work out and very easily. You can see that the striping matched up very well. We're looking at the center fronts with no bands knitted on yet. But we don't have a neckline in place yet, and that's where the problem is going to arise. For the stripes to remain the same width and match from left to right and remain the same length as one another, we'll call it, we needed to keep the pieces rectangular with no shaping. So the garment is a kimono shape, which has no shoulder shaping, but it also has no neckline shaping. The back is straight across at the moment, and so is the front. And most of us don't actually want to wear it that way. But had we decreased in the normal way, the stripes would have changed length because there would have been more pink and then more purple to work into the length as I reduced the number of stitches across the neckline. If that's okay with you, you're fine, but that wasn't the effect I wanted on this garment, and that's why cut and sew is going to be such a help. Okay, let's get started. If you've taken your blood pressure medication today, because I'm about to cut the knit, it's going to be fine though, don't worry. I don't normally pin this to anything. I'm doing that so the edge won't roll and you can see what I'm doing. And because I have these nice stripes and they do match up, I don't have to measure, or I already have measured and it's marking for me. I would have put a yarn marker here if this was not the case. And I'm just going to cut a straight line by eye up to the edge of the neckline. I'll do the same on the other side. They're both cut, of course. That's what it looks like. But nothing terrible is going to happen. I'm just going to handle it gently. For this design, I have decided to shape the back neckline a little bit. Now I'm going to again use the stripe, and in order to get it even, I'm going to do it folded, starting at the bottom of the purple stripe and arching gently up to the shoulder seam. And there's what we have. Now I'm going to serge it. I used one of the pieces that I cut off to test the serging thread and tension and stitch length, and I'm quite satisfied. This serger has differential feed, which would scrunch or stretch if I wanted it to, but I really don't want it to. I'm also not really going to use the knife because I already have it trimmed the way I want it, but I will let it knock off the fuzzies. It will not do a perfect job, as you see, but it will secure the edge and the edge will be hidden. There's what I mean by not a perfect job. And I can go back. I don't want those sticking out because they could fail to get hidden. I can do that. I don't have to run through the serger again. I'm going to go ahead and use the thread that you see, though it isn't a perfect match after all, what would be, and that way you'll get to see it and I won't have to look at it very long because it's going to be enclosed in the binding. Now you know how sergers work. You have this tail. And I'm going to suggest you go ahead and start with a good tail because you can adjust the sewing by pulling the needle thread thereafter, or stretching it. And this will build in a little adjustability without any fuss whatsoever. Now running right along the edge, making sure that every knitted stitch does get captured by my serger needle. And fuzzies get trimmed off the edge, but nothing major. We continue around like this. The shoulder seam is going to be a little bit challenging because it's thick. I'll give it a nudge with my fingertips and we're over it. If you end up being concerned that this is not secure enough, you can always serge around a second time. And see if I can illustrate something I automatically do with my fingertips. As I go, I'm rotating these stitches into position so that they don't escape from getting captured by the stitching. Take it slowly, no need to rush. When we get to the end, I plan to leave a good tail for potential adjustment also. And you will notice something. While coming up the diagonal, it laid quite flat. I might even want to stretch it just a hair, which I can do because I left this tail, and it just adjusts that needle thread along. Now if we compare it to the other front, I would suspect that the one I adjusted is a bit longer, and it is. I'm adjusting this one now. I overdid it right there, no problem. We can go back. Now I want these to end up the same length, and they are now. Now, around the back, we were going across stitches, and it has a different effect. And actually, it's a bit too stretched out, in my opinion. Let's get a hold of that needle thread and bring it in. This is much easier for this kind of a project than trying to adjust your differential feed and guess ahead of time what setting will work right. Plus, our knitted fabric's a bit heavier than what the serger was really designed to do, and it'll work it. But the differential feed is not as effective. Now, because I told you that we can, and because I would like my edge a little bit neater for hanging on the knitting machine, which I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and give it another run around. There we are. That's secure enough. Now we can go over to the knitting machine. And what I'm going to do is hang the edge on the machine with the right side, in this garment it's the knit side, facing away from me. Here I have the left side hung and the right side spaced so that it'll come out even. And we're going to hang the edge behind the serging. It has to be behind. Let me find something to point with. You wouldn't want the needle to go in there, you'd want it to go in there. And while I work, I also need to make sure that each needle goes into a separate opening in the fabric, same as always. Because as you know, if you were to put two needles into one opening, the stitches would appear to form, but then they would unform themselves. So we'll hang this evenly all the way across, as I'm doing, and the presence of stripes makes it easy to double check your evenness. For example, I was able to check the point at the left at which the green and blue stripe adjoined, and it was at needle 51, so I arranged for them to do so on the right as well. This is a very tolerant machine, and it would probably knit this first row right over the serging. But not all machines will, and occasionally this one objects also, especially since the yarn I'm using is at the top end. Therefore, I'm going to manually knit row 1 rather than risk it. And this is what I mean when I say that. I put it in quite a few of my patterns anytime we're doing something especially challenging to the machine. Manually knitting the first row can save all kinds of headaches and cause success instead of failure. So with the needles all the way forward, and whatever beginning you have happening already hung on the needles, lay the yarn in the hook, close the latch, draw back, and form a stitch. You do have to get all your stitches the same length, but that's not nearly as hard as it sounds. Watch if I make a mistake, how obvious it is. And I can draw it back to look and feel the same as the others and continue across. Once I do this, I'll just knit the band rows. This is going to be a wide band, so I will knit 28 rows. And I'm going to do that off camera because we all know how to knit 28 rows. My 28 rows are knitted, and normally I might hang this edge to finish the band. But here's where we are going to change up so as to be able to hide our serging. I'm just going to bind off. That way I can overlap the edge and seam in such a way that this band is hidden. The remainder of this demo will be accomplished on this swatch, which is made in the same manner as the main garment. It's just that, of course, it looks slightly different, and I don't want to confuse you when you see it. But we have one cut edge that you will see in the band video being hung and then covered, and one cast on edge with waste yarn, a lining, and an exterior to the hem. And the nature of that is it still rolls, so we'll be treating it so that it won't to get a finished edge. Now here's our simulated neckband. I made the one on the sample only 14 rows in total, half the length of the one on the real garment, partly because it's going to be easier to keep the work in the picture for you, but partly to make the point that the function of this band is not dependent on width. You could even go narrower than this. It only has to be big enough to wrap all the way around to where you see those black strands of yarn. And that's the other thing you need to be aware of. If we just close it over here and stitch down to this area, sometimes the serging pops out and I don't want to see it. I don't want to think about it ever again. So the way to make absolutely certain that that does not happen is use those spots where we initially hung the neck edge on the machine, and that first row of stitching made these black strands. If we sew to the black strands, the coverage will be perfect. It is slower than just sewing. However, I only find whip stitching is necessary, nothing fancy. Make sure you only go under a black strand, because what we don't want to do is accidentally go through and make the stitch that I'm making now showing the outside. This looks so nice and neat. Let's not mess that up. You can go through every stitch or every other stitch, whichever you like. For great coverage every stitch. See it disappearing? This doesn't look all that nice, but once we've gone across, it looks super. Sometimes you have to dig around a little bit to find your black strand. There's that one. So this was done on both front bands on the garment you saw without such fuzziness about sewing into the black strands, because that was a traditional hung edge working only from the vertical sweep of the knitting. The cut edge is the one that I'm concerned that we stitch exactly in this manner. So take your time going around where the serging is to make sure it gets completely covered. Just about finished. At the very end, tuck any serging on into the hem and stitch it closed to hide it forever. Of course, on the garment, you'll just be going around to more band. You won't have an end such as this, but there would be occasions when you might, and that's how you finish it up. So let's have a good look at it. Outside looks beautiful. Inside looks beautiful. Even if I try, I can't expose any serging. Even though it looks great, it's always a good idea with a hem knitted vertically, basically. This is vertical. Started here, knitted up. To give it a lengthwise pull, I've got a square knitting needle that I just had handy and pulled in there. That will set those stitches and make it lay down more attractively even than it already was. Here's the finished garment. The pattern for this will be appearing in Country Knitting of Maine News and Views sometime in 2019. For more kimono-inspired garments, check out my Kimono Commotion book, available as a download from my website.